Welcome everyone to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. This is our second class in our new series of creating a life of joy. So I want to start with a review for those who maybe were not here last time, and it's always good to review. I will be adding just a little bit additional, but I'll just do a quick review. We started with a very important statement, and that is that being happy, being in a state of joy, is a moral obligation. And we discuss that because usually when we think of joy, we don't necessarily think of it being a moral obligation. But we answered that by simply saying that if a person thinks whether I'm happy or I'm not happy, whether I'm angry or not angry, whether I'm depressed or not depressed, it's all about me. But as we discussed, it affects everyone around us. So if someone is not a happy person, it shows in our speech, it shows in our body language, and that affects everyone around us. So being happy is a moral obligation because, like I said, being sad, depressed, angry just radiates into the world and affects everyone around us. And then we made a very, very important point that being happy does not come automatically. It takes a lot of work. And usually we don't think of, we just, either I'm happy or I'm not happy. Either the factors in my life give me reason to be happy or not. Or I'm born with a happy disposition or an unhappy disposition. And we try to discount that completely and make the point that being in a state of joy is a conscious decision that we make. In other words, we could have all kinds of factors happening around us that may influence us not to be happy. But that isn't what makes us happy or not happy. What makes us in a state of joy is deciding that this is my state of consciousness that I want to be, despite many times things that are happening around me. I think we all know cases of people who have, let's say, many strikes against them, have many very difficult situations to deal with, but nonetheless, they maintain a certain level of joy. And so here, this is important. So what I want to add here is a beautiful permutation. If you look at the word machshava, mem chet shin bet hey, and we permute the letters, it spells out exactly besimcha, with joy. So it's not just like a little cute letter game. It's really pointing out that the reality of being besimcha is almost totally dependent on our thought process, our state of consciousness, what we make out of life's predicaments, what life throws at us. We can either get hit on the head by the ball, or we can catch it and do our best to deal with it in a state of joy. I want to go back to this idea of a moral obligation. And there's something that we didn't mention. And this is such an important thing because we've mentioned many times in different classes, different contexts, that the Jewish people are representatives of God in the world, whether we like it or not. That's people look at Jews as we're representatives of the Torah, representatives of all the Jewish people and of God. And so if you can imagine let's say a very religious person, a very, very religious person who exudes unhappiness. They have a frown on their face all the time. They're impatient. They're angry. They lack good. They lack good midot. Whatever it is, this is why we say it's a moral obligation. Because you can imagine how someone who's not religious and looks at this person and thinks, this is what a religious person is? This is what the Torah, someone who learns and lives Torah, this is how they turn out. So here we could see a very, very real manifestation of being in a state of joy as being a moral obligation. Because if not, we reflect very poorly on Judaism, on Torah, on other Jews, and on God. So this is a very, very, very important idea. So this is a review. The last thing that we talked about, much of it might have been in the discussion group, and this is without a doubt one of the greatest challenges that we all face, not just once in our lives, but many, many times, is how to maintain a state of joy when tragic things are happening around us that touch us directly, or Israel, and since we're all connected, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Lezeh, all of Israel is responsible one for the other. Or if there are people close to us who are sick or who are suffering. This is one of the greatest challenges, is how to maintain a state of joy when there is good reason to the need to empathize with people who are in pain or suffering. So we discussed that at great length, and we quoted from Shlomo HaMelech, Ecclesiastes, there's a time to laugh and there's a time to cry. And so when we talk about being joyous, like Rabbi Nachman says, mitzvah gedola liyot b'simcha tamid. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're dancing and singing all of the time. There is a certain level of inner joy that remains with us no matter what is happening. And so I want to bring something new here. And I heard this from Reb Shlomo, and he quoted the Vorka Rebbe. And he took the incident of the Akedah. Avram is bringing his beloved son to offer him to God. Okay, we're not going to go into this whole incident. It's one of the deepest, most profound events in the entire Tanakh, the entire Bible, the sacrifice of Yitzchak. Now, can anyone imagine that Avram was in a state of joy? He's doing the mitzvah. He seems to be ready to go through with this, but it's very, very hard to imagine that he's in a state of joy. But the Vorka Rebbe said something very interesting. He said, if Avraham wouldn't have been in a state of joy, he would not have heard the angel come and say, Avram, don't do it, because he had to be in a state of prophecy in order to hear the angel. because we have a general principle that the sages said that prophecy can't happen unless a person is in a state of joy. This is like a general principle that a prophet cannot receive prophecy if he's depressed or sad or in a state of mourning. That's why we say that Yaakov, the whole time that he thought Yosef had died, he couldn't get over it. He could not get over it. We're told that during that whole time, he lost his Ruach HaKodesh, his sense of prophecy. Only when he heard that Yosef's still alive, and it actually says in the Torah, Vayachi Ruach Yaakov, something like that, that the spirit of Yaakov was revived. And the commentaries say that he received Ruach HaKodesh again, because now he was back in a state of joy. And so the Vorka Rebbe said Avram must have been in a state of joy, or he wouldn't have been able to hear the angel speaking to him. So this brings up a lot of questions. If we look at prophecy, remember we have a general principle that a factor that must be there for a prophet is being in a state of joy. But if you look, can we imagine that Jeremiah or Ezekiel or Isaiah, when they are warning the people and painting a picture of the catastrophe that is going to happen if the people don't change their ways, and some of the language is horrific. It is so graphic. Can we imagine while they are giving over these prophecies, or they're receiving these prophecies, that they're in a state of joy? It seems like a total contradiction. But there is a way to understand it in the following way. And I'm reading from Jeremiah, the 15th chapter, the 15th verse. And this will explain to us how we can solve this seeming contradiction. So this is what Yirmiyahu says. He's speaking to God. He says, God, you understand. Remember me and care for me. Avenge me on my persecutors. You are long-suffering. Do not take me away. Think of how I suffer reproach for your sake. Now listen carefully. When your words came, I ate them. They were my joy and my heart's delight, for I bear your name, O God. So this one quote, if we expand it to all of the prophets, to Avram, so we see that the joy that we're talking about is feeling as being a representative of God. We don't have to be a prophet to feel like we're a representative of God, like we spoke before. Every Jew by nature is looked upon as a representative of Judaism, of Torah, of God, of all of Israel. And so Yirmiyahu is saying, God, I'm suffering for these prophecies that you're imparting to me, and I have to give over to the people. And the people are persecuting me. Who wants to hear such prophecies? But then Yirmiyahu says that despite that, your word to me is my joy, because for I bear your name, O God. So anyone in a leadership position, large or small, knows that there's called a lot of perks with being a leader, meaning there's a lot of satisfaction that we can get from taking on a project stepping up many times when other people won't, and putting heart and soul into something and succeeding. But we also know anyone in a leadership position, it is hard work and hardly anyone appreciates what you do. And you're always wrong in someone's eyes. And no matter what you do, you end up stepping on people's toes. People step on your toes. So how can you maintain a sense of joy? So the joy comes from the initial taking on the position of being the leader. And that goes with us our whole lives. On Shabbos morning, in the Amida, so we say, Yismach Moshe b'matanat chelko, ki even ne'aman karatelo. Moshe is joyous in his portion, for God called him my faithful servant. Usually we think of a servant as not such a high position. You have to fulfill your master's every whim, every decree. And Moshe, the prayer is saying, Yismach Moshe b'matana chelko. Moshe is joyous in the gift of his portion, that he is a servant of God, a faithful servant of God. So this holds true for the case of Avram. It's not like as he's about to slaughter his son, he's joyous in the sense that we think of it. But in a deep inside level, Avram is always joyous because he's been chosen by God and he believes that he's doing God's will. And so here we see Yirmiyahu saying, God, do you see how I'm suffering for your sake? But nonetheless, he says, your words, when your words came, I ate them. They were my joy and my heart's delight. So this is a deep understanding for all of us. We all experience tragedy in our life. We all experience personal pain, pain of empathy with other people. But if we have a basic understanding of what joy is and a basic understanding of who we are in this world and our relationship to God and to Torah and to our own soul, this is a constant joy. So when Rabbi Nachman says, mitzvah gedola liyot b'simcha tamid, it's a big mitzvah to be in joy all the time. Again, doesn't mean we're dancing and singing 24/7. It means, though, that we have a basic joyous outlook on life, and it goes with us, even in those moments when we're a little bit down in the dumps, it still stays with us. So this is a very, very important idea. Now, what we're going to do with the rest of the class is I'm going to begin, and we will not finish in 1 week, but we're going to go through major obstacles to being happy and how to deal with them. And then later, we're going to get to different attitudes and behaviors that are essential to be happy. We're going to do this for about 15 minutes. And then if you look in your WhatsApp or in the beginning of the chats, there is a chart from Rav Ginsburg, and we're going to go over that. Every class, I'm going to try to kind of go back and forth from very, very practical down to earth and a more spiritual Torah view of joy. So let's start with some of the obstacles to being joyous that we need to overcome. The premise here is we have to work at being joyous. It does not come necessarily naturally. And in fact, human nature almost leads us to be unhappy. And so why would I say such a thing? It actually says in the Gemara about human nature, if a person has 2 of something, they want 4. It's actually talking about money. If you have 2, you're going to want 4. If you have 4, you're going to want 8. If you have 8, you're going to want 16. In other words, there is a certain insatiable part of human nature that always wants more. Now, this can be turned into something very, very positive, because if, let's say, learning Torah, let's say we just finished one tractate of the Gemara, then it's like, wow, I can't wait to start the next one. In other words, I'm not going to rest on my laurels. It's not enough that I learned one tractate. And we can translate this into virtually anything in a positive way. Whatever I've accomplished, I can accomplish more. Well, one of the greatest examples of this was the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was known to, in a sense, push people beyond what they thought they could accomplish. And so many, many times a shaliach, one of the people that the Rebbe sent out, would come and have what's called a private audience, yechidus, and the Rebbe would ask, how are things going in wherever the city is? And the person many times very proudly would say, we only started 3 years ago, and we just finished building a mikvah, and we started a preschool, and we now have Friday night dinner, and like, in a sense, waiting for the pat on the back from the Rebbe. And then the Rebbe would say, and what's next? What are you going to do next? And so it's not like the Rebbe was dissatisfied, but he always wanted to give the feeling to people you could do more. So that's in a positive thing. In the negative side, we all know very much this idea of being dissatisfied, whether it's at work or with relationships or with our financial standing or our neighbors or whatever it is, that it's so deeply ingrained, this idea of always looking for something more, something better. So this is something we all have to deal with. And there are times that our dissatisfaction is real. Let's say we're at work and we're not really happy there. And so dissatisfaction can turn into something if we work with it, if we look at it, well, what is it that I'm dissatisfied with? Is there a way I can fix it in the present situation? And if not, well, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to be stuck in this situation forever? So in other words, even being dissatisfied can be turned around. But again, it's a mental decision not to get bogged down in human nature of dissatisfaction. Along with this, a big obstacle for many people to be happy is, again, almost a natural tendency to compare ourselves with other people. And we look around the world, we look at the media, we look at friends, we look at neighbors, And like, why don't I have what this person has? Or why does that person deserve what they have? Or why don't I have this, that, or the other thing? And we're always comparing ourselves with other people. That is a recipe for unhappiness because, first of all, we have no idea if any of these people are happy. Especially because of the media, Hollywood. So we see these glamorous movie stars, these big rock stars, sports heroes, politicians with so much power and influence. And we falsely assume that since they have a lot of money, they have a lot of power, they have a lot of fame, they must be very happy, because isn't that what happiness is? Is having lots of money, fame, fortune, power? But I think we all know very well, and we can thank many of these people who, when they write their autobiographies, and all of a sudden it turns out the torture and the dissatisfaction and the unhappiness and the addictions and the broken relationships and you name it, and the whole time all you see is smiling at the cameras, and we assume they must be happy. So this is a great pitfall of comparing ourselves to other people and imagining that if I only had what they had, I would be happy. And one of our premises is happiness does not come from anything on the outside. That's why it says in Pirkei Avot, Eza Ashir, who is the rich one? Hasameach b'chelko, the one who is happy with their lot. Rich has nothing to do with how much money you have, how accomplished you are, what kind of job you have, what kind of title you have. Being rich is being happy with what you have. Now, there is almost a built-in paradox here, because on the other hand, we're told spiritually, we should always be striving for more, and even physically. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting a bigger house, a bigger car, a better job, a better salary, a better vacation. There's nothing wrong with any of that in essence. What is problematic is when it overcomes us and we become fixated and we become very, very unhappy because we don't have all of those things. So this is a very kind of slippery slope, or a balancing act of how to be happy with what we have and still be willing to strive for more at the same time. But it can be done. It absolutely can be done. And this goes along with the idea of equating happiness with success. Again, it almost sounds like 1 and 1 equals 2. If you're successful in something, it must bring happiness. But we know that that's not true from the examples we brought already. We have movie stars in the top of the world, people who win, gold medals or 5 gold medals at the Olympics, people who are at the top of their field, and they're still not happy, because happiness, in essence, has nothing to do with success. It can lead to happiness. Being successful can lead to happiness, but it's not a guarantee, and it's not the purpose of necessarily of being successful. In other words, success leads to happiness, and it can lead to happiness. But I didn't say that really correctly. Being successful can lead to happiness, but we can't equate being successful with guaranteeing us being happy. And again, there's so many movies, so many books, so many articles written by people who honestly reveal the difficulties that they go through many times after success. And again, we could come up with so many examples of movie stars and sports figures, everything, whose lives absolutely fell apart when they reached the top. I mean, can you imagine you reach the top, and then it turns you have no privacy left. You can't go anywhere anymore without a bodyguard. You can't go anywhere without being recognized and people wanting your autograph and taking pictures of you. And then you have the stalkers that start stalking you. Like our image of what leads to happiness is such a false image. Joy comes from an inner spiritual consciousness of coming to terms with our own lives, understanding the factors that lead to happiness, and to pursue those. This is what we can do for tonight in this realm. There is so much more. I actually want to mention one more thing, and that is the equation that people sometimes make between being joyous and having fun. Especially in our society today, where people, I mean, you read any poll, people are not happy. You look at the world in general, most people are not happy people. And so, but people want to be happy. So what do people do in great measure? They try to have fun. They go to a bar, they go to a party, they bet on races, they try drugs, they drink a lot, they get involved in extreme sports, they go to movies, they go to concerts. Now, each and every one of these things, there's, in a sense, there's nothing wrong with it, and there's nothing wrong with having fun. But there is something very, very wrong with thinking that short, fun experiences is going to make me a happy person. Fun lasts for the time that you're having the fun. Joy is an ongoing process. And as I said, there's nothing wrong with having fun, and fun can make us happy. But again, the problem is when we think that, you know, going to a party and drinking a lot is going to make me happy the next day. It doesn't work like that. And usually it works the opposite. It drives us deeper into a hole, and fun can become addictive. That because while we're having fun, we feel, we'll call it happy. But just like any drug, when it wears off, usually the down, the fall brings us to a lower position than we were beforehand. And that's why for many, many people, the pursuit of fun is addictive. And like drugs, it doesn't lead to joy at all. So we all have to, again, it's all balance. Almost everything I've said tonight is about balancing things that could lead to joy. Success can lead to joy. Fun can lead to joy. Pursuing more of things can bring us joy. Wanting to accomplish more can bring us joy. And all of these things, if they're not balanced properly, can make us more and more unhappy. Okay, so now I'm going to ask everyone to either go to the beginning of the charts, of the chats, and this time it did get in. Last time I thought it got in and it didn't. This time it did get in. Or on your WhatsApp or your Telegram. We sent this out today. So there are two charts here. This is from Rav Ginsburg. This is from his chapter called Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. Serve God with joy. So let's do the top one. Because the book that this chapter is from is called Sod Hashem Li'Re'av, the secret of God are for those who have awe of him. So the whole book is about the four-letter name of God in hundreds and hundreds of different ways. So in this chapter, he wants to explain how being joyous can be equated to the four letters of God's name. Here, we're not going to go deeply into the connections of each of these joys with the letters of God's name, but the overall idea is that Kabbalah, as we've discussed many times, works very, very much with paradigms and models. In other words, it is actually a very structured, organized type of thought. And so Rav Ginsburg uses the four-letter name of God as an organizational tool to understand virtually any subject you could think of. He does the same with the Sfirot. Whatever the subject is, he could show how we can understand it in its full manifestation through corresponding it to the Sfirot. So here we have the four-letter name of God, but we're going to start from below, from the bottom Hey. And I'll read it in Hebrew and English. It says, Shiflut be'etzem, Pnimiyut hamalchut shel kedusha. This is what's called existential, essential sense of lowliness or humbleness. This is the inner dimension of the sphere of Malchut. Malchut's always associated with the final Hey of God's name. And in English, I've written the joy of humbleness. Now, sometimes people think being humble means a person is totally passive, maybe a floor shmata. It's in the beginning of the chart of the chats. Bracha, it's in the beginning of the chats, and it's on your WhatsApp. From today. So the joy of humbleness, what Rav Ginsburg means is that having a proper understanding of who we are in the world, who we are in relationship to an infinite God, who we are in relationship to all of Am Yisrael, who we are in relationship to the people around us. And this doesn't talk about liberating ego, but it does talk about having a humble state of mind. And when we have a humble state of mind, there's a great joy in this, because ego, when we talked before about human nature, the ego in so many cases is insatiable. It wants more and more recognition, more and more influence, more and more power. And like one's worldview is the whole world revolves around me. So being humble just means going away from that kind of consciousness, understanding we're human beings, we're somewhat flawed, we make mistakes, we are in relationship with an infinite God, and that should lead to a great amount of joy, because we don't have unrealistic expectations of who we think the ego is trying to tell us that we are. It's just being very realistic about our place in the world. It doesn't mean the most humble person on the face of the earth was Moshe. But Moshe was a king. He led Israel out of Egypt. He stood up to Pharaoh. He stood up sometimes to God. He stood up to the people. He was powerful and humble at the same time. That's the essence of Malchut, of what's called Shiflut Be'etzem. Now we go to the Vav of God's name. We're going, as it were, up the ladder. This is called Simcha Shel Hakarat Tova V'Hodaya. This is what's called the joy of appreciation. And then in parentheses, it says, Bina Simcha Ad Hod Itpashtet. Itpashetet. What does this mean? In Kabbalah, there's a concept that the sphere of Bina, which we'll get to the next one, spreads all the way down to Hod. If you remember, Bina is the highest on the left side, Hod is the lowest on the left side. And there's an expression that the joy of Bina, for those who remember that the inner dimension of Bina is joy. And we'll discuss that in 1 minute. But it spreads down to Hod. Hod is the root of Todah, Hodaya, the language of thanks, appreciation, and acknowledgement. So there is a great simcha of appreciating what we have, appreciating what God gives us, appreciating what other people do for us, and the ability to praise. And that's why one of the greatest spiritual experiences is praising God, especially in what's called Hallel, the special prayer that we say on holidays and Rosh Chodesh, where we say, in most cases, sing the Hallel, where we're praising God. So there's a tremendous joy that comes from that. Anyone who has been with a congregation that sings the Hallel, and in our day, especially because of Rav Shlomo, that he introduced the idea of musical instruments and singing Hallel, which is spread all over the world. I was about to say Rav Ginsburg, but anyone who's been to a Verbringen or Hitvadut from Rav Ginsburg, it's always punctuated with music and very joyous music. I had the great privilege to be with Rav Ginsburg on Purim night, along with hundreds of other people. And the singing and the dancing was But it's all praising God and being happy with our lot. That we're connected to Torah, we're connected to God, we're connected to other Yidden, to all of Israel. That brings a great joy. Now we go up to the Hey of God's name. And this is Bina. This is called Simcha Shahid Bonanut. Yayin Amisameach. Shorish Haratzo Bebina. This is called the joy of meditation, contemplation. And the expression is the wine that makes us joyous. This is obviously connected to Purim, that the joy of Purim is connected with the eating and the drinking of Purim. And so Bina's inner dimension, and we're going to explore this deeper, because of all of the Sfirot, the one most associated with joy is Bina, understanding. And it's based on the verse, Eim habanim smecha. The mother of children is very happy, is joyous. And so it's explained here, it means physical children. And it also means giving birth to a new idea, a new project, a new creative endeavor, a new discovery. All of that is giving birth. And so this is such an important idea that giving birth to new ideas should bring us tremendous joy. And especially what's called a chidush, a Torah, a novel Torah concept. That here we are 3,300 years after the giving of the Torah, but any person can still come up with a new way of understanding something in the Torah that no one has ever said before. It may be based on many, many, many things that we've learned, and it usually is. But the fact that we can still come up with a new idea in Torah, this is what's called the oral Torah. The oral Torah is alive and well. Now going up to the highest of the letters, the Yud, this is called Simcha Shel Mitzvah, the joy of a mitzvah. And I remember, I think it was Dara in no, I mentioned it, and Dara also mentioned it, that the Arizal, when he was asked, what did you do to merit such lofty revelations in the Torah? And he answered, Simcha Shel Mitzvah, that he always tried to do the mitzvot in a state of joy. So here we have kind of like a chicken and an egg idea. In other words, having the consciousness of doing the mitzvah in joy makes it so much more meaningful, so much more impactful. But at the same time, doing a mitzvah leads to joy. And so actually Rav Ginsburg explains it's the same with the verse we said before, Eim habanim smecha. A mother of children is happy. So the way we read that is, after the mother has children, then she's joyous. But Rav Ginsburg said, at the same time, she can only give birth if she was previous in a state of joy. In other words, that's what brought on the pregnancy. In other words, being in a state of joy brings the mitzvah. And then doing the mitzvah brings additional joy. like it says in Pirkei Avot, schar mitzvah, mitzvah. The reward of a mitzvah is the ability to do another mitzvah. One mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. There's much discussion on this idea of simcha shel mitzvah. And I think in the last class of our series on war and peace in Jewish tradition, we were talking about Mashiach, the world to come. And there's this concept that in the future, the mitzvah will become nullified. And one of the explanations is, especially in the Messianic era, where at least in the beginning and maybe the entire time, mitzvah will not be nullified. In fact, only then will we be able to do the mitzvah in the fullest way possible. But some people interpret when it says that the mitzvah will become nullified, they'll become nullified to the joy that they create. In other words, the created joy from the mitzvah will become the more essential thing. Of course, you couldn't get to it without doing the mitzvah, but it's almost like a cause and effect, that the effect actually becomes the main thing that we're going for. How we got to, better than the cause and effect, is a means and an end. You can't get to the end without the means, but the means is for the end. But then there's also a way of unifying them, where the means and the end are actually really one thing. So all of this, there's much more to say, but here, just to review, there's a certain joy in having a realistic and humble view of oneself in the world. We might think the opposite, that it's a very passive way, but it's not at all. It's just a healthy, realistic assessment of who we are in the world. And then there's the joy of gratitude, of thanks, of appreciation for everything that we do have. There's a tremendous joy in that. And then there's the simcha of meditation and contemplation. And then finally, we talked about the joy of doing a mitzvah. So I see it's getting late, so we'll save the other chart for next week. And we'll end with a blessing. Hopefully everyone had a joyous Purim, and hopefully it wasn't just fun, it's a kind of a joy that we can continue and let grow and integrate deep into our beings.